Coors announcing it's closing the larger of two Leinenkugel breweries in Chippewa Falls. The company says they're moving production to their main site in Milwaukee at the end of a large contract brewing agreement. A timeline of when the brewery will close, as well as the number of jobs that are affected, not known just yet. Former president of Leinenkugel expressed his disappointment in the statement, saying, in part, quoting now, "I am deeply saddened by the decision of the Molson Coors leadership team to close our Chippewa Falls brewery at home. I feel for all impacted employees and their families in Chippewa Falls and trust that Molson Coors leadership will do everything possible to ease their pain during this challenging time," end quote.